Today's video is brought to you by Audible. Hey guys, Jonathan here with TLD. Hope you guys are doing better than the Bulls. If you are a Bulls fan, I feel your pain. If not, go easy on me because the D-Rose news is so sad. Anyways, I am here with a much requested comparison of the brand new iPad Air versus the iPad mini with Retina Display, because now the gap between the two is smaller than ever, from the pricing to the hardware to the performance. So if you are up in the air between the two, this video will hopefully help ease your decision. Now, if you happen to miss my comparison of the first generation versus the second generation iPad mini, I'll have it annotated up here and also linked right below that thumbs up button just in case you missed it. That video was more based off speed test and performance because the gap between those two were pretty significant. These two, on the other hand, the iPad Air and iPad mini with Retina Display, the gap as far as performance goes is much smaller. So this is really going to come down to everyday usage and how it actually fits into your lifestyle. So to kick things off, the iPad mini with Retina Display starts out at $399. That's going to get you an A7 processor and a 7.9-inch display with a resolution of 2048 by 1536. For $100 more, the iPad Air will get you the same A7 processor, and they both do feature the M7 co-processor for motion processing. You're going to get the same 2048 by 1536 resolution, but you're going to jump up to a 9.7-inch display as opposed to the 7.9-inch display on the iPad mini. Apart from that, they have the same cameras, Wi-Fi connections, battery life, so you can see there are a lot of similarities. So aside from the obvious form factor differences, there are a couple variances that I want to point out, starting with the processor. Even though they both feature the same exact A7 processor, the iPad Air is clocked slightly higher at around 1.4 gigahertz, whereas the iPad mini is clocked right around 1.3 gigahertz. Now, as far as how that translates into actual performance, if you were just to look solely at benchmarks, and Geekbench here, for example, the iPad Air, of course, does score higher than the iPad mini. Now, as far as how those numbers equate into actual real-world performance, I would say 99% of the people out there wouldn't tell a difference between the two as far as gaming or snappiness. They are both blazing fast, and to me, there's not enough there to solely base your buying decision off benchmarks or a slightly higher clock speed. They both perform really well. Now, the next big difference is the actual display quality, not the size, but the actual quality. And there have been reports that the actual color accuracy on the iPad mini is subpar compared to the iPad Air. I have used both in hand, and I will say it is noticeable, but again, it's one of those things where the majority of the people out there won't notice the difference between the two. I will say I am a little disappointed that the quality isn't up to the iPad Air standards, but as far as how I use my iPad, it's more for media consumption as opposed to creation, so I don't need a super accurate display. I'm really going to rely on my computer for those needs. So with that in mind, if you do want to use your iPad more for creation and photo editing and things like that, and you need the accuracy, you might want to consider the iPad Air. Now, aside from those two major points for me, it really comes down to portability and how you plan on using it in your life. For me, before the iPad mini, I didn't really use the iPad that much because if you put a laptop or an iPad in front of me, I would always lean towards the laptop because I can do more. I'm going to be on Final Cut editing, working, being more productive in my eyes. Not to say that you can't create an iPad, but before the iPad mini, like I said, I would always choose a laptop. So for me, why I prefer the iPad mini is definitely the form factor. It's more of a complementary piece of tech now. I can use it alongside my laptop and not really feel like I have to choose. I can consume media, watch Netflix, play games because I do enjoy that form factor for playing games in the iPad mini. It's easier to throw in my bag with all my camera gear. It just fits a lot better. Now, I will say because the iPad Air is thinner and lighter, the difference between those two as far as weight goes is pretty small. The iPad Air weighs just 1 pound, whereas the iPad mini is just about 7/10 of a pound, so there's not a huge gap there. And that made it a lot harder of a choice than I initially thought it would be. So watching movies, playing games with the iPad Air was a lot more enjoyable than it ever has been before. I could watch an hour-long show off iTunes on the iPad Air and it wouldn't feel like my arm was straining. So there was a lot of good, but ultimately it just wasn't as portable as the iPad mini was for me. So that's kind of my thoughts on who I think the iPad mini is for. As far as who I think the iPad Air is for, if you're going to use it as your main computing device and you really don't plan on using a laptop, then obviously go for the bigger screen. It's a great complementary item to a desktop, so if you don't plan on using a laptop or anything in between, then the iPad Air makes a lot of sense. Another example that comes to mind would be using the iPad in the kitchen. I think the iPad Air would make a much more enjoyable piece in your kitchen, having to see recipes on a bigger display and things like that. So if you really don't need it so much for portability and you like the idea of a bigger screen, then again, the iPad Air is probably going to be a better choice for you. Again, it really comes down to how you're going to use these in your lives. You're not getting any extra screen resolution on either. People are saying, is it a big difference between the two because the iPad mini is more dense because there's more pixels and a smaller form factor? And to me, it's not really a huge difference. They both look fantastic. It's not like one is better than the other. Again, the iPad Air does have a better color accuracy, but as far as actual sharpness, they are both stellar. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it helped ease your decision between the two. If you guys enjoyed this style of video and thought it fit better as opposed to more of a benchmarky type video, definitely know by leaving a thumbs up. It is much appreciated. And of course, in return, you get a virtual high five at your face. Now before I hop out of here, I want to give a huge shout out to audible.com for making this video possible. They thought highly enough of the channel and of course the audience to reach out to us, and it makes a huge difference in helping us bring this awesome content to you guys. If you guys weren't aware, audible.com is a leading audiobook provider with more than 150,000 downloadable titles ranging from all types of genres. Now what's funny is I'd actually bought the Steve Jobs biography when it came out way back when, and I had never read it. Now it has nothing to do with me not liking to read. I wish I could read more often. I'm just usually really busy, and when I do get free time, I usually want to put that towards bettering myself with video production or editing. But with Audible, in situations where I do have more time, like driving or I'm at the gym, I was able to take advantage of that and actually listen to the book. So if you are a fan of Apple, it is definitely interesting, and I would recommend checking it out. And you can actually do so for free by heading over to audible.com/today, and they'll actually give you a free audiobook just for trying out their service. So if you do enjoy the content that I put out, you can score a free audiobook and help the channel out at the same time. Audible.com/today, which will also be linked down below. So aside from that, again, thank you guys very much for watching. If you have any questions on the iPad Air or iPad mini, definitely leave me a comment down below. Or the actual better place to get a hold of me is on Twitter, Facebook, or Google+, which will also be linked down below along with the gear that I use to make these videos. Again, this is Jonathan with TLD, and I will see you guys later.